Hello beautiful people, welcome to another tutorial on my channel. And today's tutorial will be learning how to cut and sew this beautiful palazzo jumpsuit. And if this is your first time here, don't forget to like, share and subscribe. And for the returning viewers, I say a big thank you. Without further delay, let's get started. This is a cut together jumpsuit, and because of that I'll be drafting it out on the pattern paper first. The paper cannot take my full length, so because of that I joined two paper together, and I'll be starting by drawing out my starting line, which is also going to serve as my shoulder line. So once I'm done, I'm going to leave some allowances. I left an allowance of 5 inches from the top down to the full length of my palazzo on the paper. And this allowance is meant to contain the crotch extension for both the front piece and the back piece. And now that I'm done, I ruled a straight line, as you can see, and from that line I'm going to start marking out my measurements. I'm starting with the back measurement first, and that is half of my shoulder measurement, and that is 7 inches. Once I'm done marking, I will come down at that point. I mark by 1 inch to serve as my shoulder slope. And then the next thing to do is to mark out my neck width, which is 3 inches, and I'm going to connect it down to the shoulder slope like so. So now that I'm done, the next thing to do is to mark out my armhole measurement, my round armhole, and to get that you're going to divide your bust circumference by 6 plus 1.5 inches. So I got 7.5 inches, but because this jumpsuit is a sleeveless jumpsuit, I decided to reduce it by ½ inch so that my armpit will not be too revealing. And once I'm done, I'm just making sure that it is still 7 inches. Then I'm going to connect it like so, and I will mark out the midpoint of my armhole, and that's going to be 3.5 inches. And from there I will come in by ½ inch, and on the chest line I'm going to mark out the quarter of my bust circumference plus 1 inch sewing allowance, and then connect it like so. In case you're wondering, I use 3 yards of crepe fabric for this style. And once I'm done connecting my armhole, the next thing to do is to mark out all my measurements from the starting line, which is the shoulder line. So I will mark out my bust point, which is 10 inches. Then I will also mark my half length, which is also 16 inches, and that is also my waistline. Then I will go down by 8 inches to mark out my hip line. So I'm just going to count 8 inches to mark out my hip line, and then from there I'll just go down and mark out my full length. Okay, so now I'm just connecting the lines together like so, drawing a straight line across all my measurements. If you are on the tall side, you can use 8.5 to 9.5 inches for your hip line, for the distance from your waistline to your hip line. And please don't forget, this is a cut together jumpsuit, so there will not be any cutting. And now that I'm done, I'm just going to go ahead and label all the lines from my chest line, then bust point, my waistline and my hip line, and down to the length, to my trouser length. Okay guys, it's time to mark out my horizontal measurement, and on the bust point I'll also mark out quarter of my bust measurement plus 1 inch sewing allowance. Then on the waistline also, I'll repeat the same thing, quarter of my waist measurement plus 1 inch sewing allowance. So I already calculated it with the sewing allowance, and it also on the hip line, quarter of my hip measurement plus 1 inch sewing allowance. And the measurement of the hip, what I got on the hip line is what I'll measure down to my trouser length. I already added 2 inches allowance to turn in my hemline, so please don't forget to add your hem allowance. And then the next thing is to connect all the lines like so, and I'm just going to connect it from the hip line in a straight line down to the hem of my pattern paper. Okay, now that we are done, the next thing is to measure out my crotch line, and that is I'm going to start measuring from my waistline down to my crotch line, and that is 14 inches. That is quarter of my hip measurement plus 3 inches, because this is a jumpsuit and I added half inch is allowance. And I'm going to draw a line there at my crotch line, and I'm going to extend the line out to the allowance I left earlier, like so, and that's going to serve as my crotch length. Okay, so the next thing to do is to mark out my crotch extension, and to get that, I'm just going to divide my hip circumference by 20, and that gave me 2.1, and I approximated it to 2.25 inches, and I'm just going to connect it in a slant way like so to the line I drew earlier. As you can see, I make sure it is not too curvy. And now that I'm done, the next thing to do is to extend that line down to the trouser length. Now that I'm done with that, I will go ahead to mark out my neck, and because the front neckline is going to be a V shape, I decided to mark out 8 inches deep by 3 inches wide, and I don't want my V very straight, a straight line, so I decided to make it a little bit curvy, and that is the neckline for the front piece. Okay, so the next thing to do is to mark out the half of my nipple to nipple measurement from my bust point down to the hem line of my trousers. And once I'm done marking, I'm just going to connect the lines in a straight line, as you can see me doing. And the essence of this is because I'm going to be cutting that part to give more room for the jumpsuit, to make it more wide. Don't worry, you will understand as we go ahead. Okay, so the next thing to do is to mark out my bust dart, and that is 1 inches, and I will connect it like so, as you can see. Before I draft out the back piece, I'll be marking out all my lines with my red marker to make it visible. Okay guys, for the back part of the jumpsuit, I will also be drafting on this same paper, and that is why I'm trying to differentiate the lines with my marker. Okay, so for the back neckline, because I already drew out my neck width, which is 3 inches, so I'm going to come down by 1 inch for the back, and I'm going to connect it like so. And the next thing is to go down to my crotch extension, and for the back I will also be adding my 2.25 inches. I'm just going to add 2.25 inches that will serve as my crotch for my back crotch, and I'm going to extend the line down like I did from the front pattern down to my trouser length, Now that I'm done, I will just go ahead to mark out my zipper allowance from the neckline. From the neckline of the back is going to have a zipper, so I'll just go ahead and mark out 1 inch down to the length I want my zipper to end. So for me, I am making my zipper length to be 23 inches. You can decide to make it shorter or longer if you want. So what I'm going to do next is to connect the zipper line in a straight line. Just follow what I'm doing, and once I'm done with the zipper, I will go ahead and connect my back crotch extension down to that line I marked out earlier. As you can see, I couldn't use my French curve, so I decided to use my free end because the French curve isn't giving me what I want. So I just decided to use it so to make that place not too curvy. And so guys, we are done with the front and back pattern. The red line serves for the front pattern while the pen line stands for the back pattern. And so before I cut out on the fabric, I will be marking out my armhole for the back. And what I'm just going to do is to connect it like so. And you can see those lines represent the back pattern. And now I'm just going to go ahead and cut out the pattern paper now. And please, because the front and the back pattern was drafted together, make sure you cut out the back pattern first. We'll cut out the back pattern first before cutting out the front piece. Just follow what I'm doing exactly. You cut it out along the back pattern we drew and cut off the excess paper. And so guys, this is what our pattern looks like. So before cutting it out on the fabric, I'll be cutting the line, the half nipple to nipple measurement I marked out earlier. I'll be cutting the line along the line, as you can see, and I'm going to stop at that point at the breast point, and I'll be closing in the side butts, as you can see, to give space, to create space at that point. So I'll just go ahead and tape it down with my paper tape, and you can see that we already have some allowances left after closing the bust dart. And now I can go ahead to cut it out on the fabric, and this is what it looks like. Sorry, my table was not long enough for the full length of the jumpsuit, and this is what the back pattern looks like. So cutting on my fabric, I left half inch sewing allowance at the shoulder line for the joining, and also have an inch at the crotch line, and also this is what it looks like. And now I can go ahead to remove the back pattern before cutting out the front pattern. And I'm just going to go ahead and cut out all the back, as you can see. Once I'm done cutting, I will also go ahead and place it on my fabric to cut out the front pattern. And so guys, this is what it looks like after cutting it out. This is what the front pattern looks like. And I've also added my sewing allowance to the shoulder, and also to that part down to the crotch extension. And I'm going to notch out the waistline because that is where I'll be attaching my belt. And from the waistline, I came down by 3 inches, and I'm going to notch that place because that's going to be the starting point for my pocket. And now I will be turning in my neckline with bias. You can decide to use your fabric, it's your choice. And now once I'm done, I'm going to stitch round the part I indicated with my finger. The waistline will have my belt, and now let us mark out my belt. For my belt, I'll be using the length of 26 inches, and I have 4 inches wide. Don't forget the belt will be in 2 pieces, and that is what I'm doing by marking it out. Depending on how wide you want your belt should be should determine the width you will leave. For me, I'm okay with my 4 inches because I'll still use an half an inch to turn it in. And now that I'm done, I'm going to cut it open into two to give me 2 pieces, and I just make a slant at that side, and now we have 2 pieces, and I'm going to stitch at the parts I indicated with my finger. Just like I said, you stitch along that part I indicated, and once I'm done stitching, I will be making a notch round before turning it to the other side, to the right side. And once I'm done doing that, I will do that for the other parts of the belt to make it 2 pieces, and we are good to go. So for the neckline, I told you I'll be turning my neckline with a bias, and this is exactly how to turn your neckline with a bias. Let the bias, the right side and the right side of the fabric, face each other, and you stitch down as you can see, and you stitch down to the end of the neckline, and you cut out the bias, and you turn to the wrong side. And now you turn to the wrong side and turn in the bias, as you can see me doing. And this is exactly what I'm going to do for the 2 sides of the front, for the 2 neckline of the front. And I'm also going to repeat the same thing for the 2 neckline of the back piece. And this is what it looks like after turning in the neckline for the back. And this is it. And I've also gone ahead to attach my pocket to the sides, and I've gone ahead to stitch down the crotch part of the back also. And now I'm just going to iron the 2 piece. Now that I'm done, before placing my back on the front, I'll be putting my belt at the part of the waist I notch. So what I'm going to do is just to attach my belt to that part. I will place the belt inward like so, and I'm going to repeat the same thing for the other side, and put my back and front together, pin it down, and after I'm done, I'll go over to the sewing machine to stitch down all the sides I'm pinning down. And before joining the side, please make sure you turn in the sleeve part, because it is sleeveless. Turn it with bias or fabric before joining the 2 sides. Now that I'm done stitching the 2 sides, I will place the crotch parts of the front and back pieces together like so, and straighten it up and pin it down from one side to the other side. And once I'm done, I will go over to the sewing machine and stitch that part down. And once I'm done stitching, the next thing to do is to turn in the hem of the trousers, and we are done. Thank you for watching. See you in my next video. Bye.